In discussions of judging studios in quality based on released works or in development works, Bleecker Street has always been a name that I've looked at with some level of competence and as a bit of a leading figure. And, again, I perhaps don't have the wealth of knowledge maybe others do in terms of the studio. I'm still trying to burgeon out and explore what's out there, and I've wanted to look at Bleecker Street's offerings more extensively for a long time. But in terms of pictures perhaps that I've seen in full, Teen Spirit comes to mind. I saw that one a while ago. Great movie, rather small picture. I'm not sure how widely seen it's been in regards to an audience, but I quite liked the movie. I thought Ellie Fanning did a great job in it. She was the leading role there, and I thought the use of music in that film added a lot of character. It was a well-constructed film. Or perhaps I can think about pictures I've even just covered on this channel, merely just initial witness and nothing more than that. And I've always wanted to see Mass. I haven't yet. But it was a much smaller movie, but it's boasting a lot of credits over being the directorship or the writing ship. I believe he's a first-time writer in terms of a feature film from what I saw. But the picture came across as competent. Jason Isaacs was in the cast lineup. It looked like a very well-thought-out movie from what I could witness. I mean, the drama angle I thought as well in terms of where the story went in the church setting, it was a really good application of craft, in my opinion. So as I've said, I've looked at Bleecker Street for a long time with some respect. And again, I've wanted to expand my library of understanding with Bleecker Street in regards to their pictures. And Arctic has been one that's been on my mind for a while. Although I have to qualify with this video, it's not as fresh as perhaps the majority of content that I offer here. And I do tend to cover a lot of film fare. I'm sure for those of you who follow this channel, you can attest to that. I see a wide range of offerings. Arctic fits the case of a statement that will be evolving with time. I mean, one day it'll probably, well, I know it'll cease at some point, but I did cover Arctic previously. Years ago, closer when it was the release window. So again, I'm a bit behind by about 4 years, at least all things considered. But in truth, I did cover this film at the time of the release. But as I've been stating from some coverage in terms of films long past, I'm not going to qualify the reasons as to why. I will one day. But I mentioned this, for example, let's say when I covered Brahms' The Boy 2. That was another movie I covered in anticipation of the release, actually. But unfortunately, the original cut of what I had for the video was inaccessible in both the editing and thus publishing stages. So I couldn't put up that original video even if I really wanted to. Arctic is the same case. But I don't necessarily, because some people might be like, well, it's really late, just move on. I don't want to do that, because I think it'd be fair to look at the films that, again, I ventured in once with. And I have to say, in truth, it's been nearly 5 years since the release, maybe a little under that by about around 4 somewhere, that I've basically forgotten everything. So maybe not in truth, but in current circumstances, it basically is a fresh take. Although I do remember some things, again, the Bleecker Street credits, Mads Mikkelsen's attribution, so I've been a long fan of in regards to the acting sphere. He's definitely an actor that I gravitate towards watching most of his pictures whenever he comes up. And he's basically in a much smaller picture, all things considered. Around a 90-minute movie, 98 minutes, so a little over that. Only 3 cast members, at least on IMDb. And it seems to be a smaller picture. It did get some awards recognition, so there's some competence to boast about there. And even the atmosphere of the movie, I wonder if it's just, at least from my judgment of Bleecker Street pictures, some appear a bit smaller in terms of their release stature. I wonder if it's something that's an attribute that's a common focus with their content. This is what it says if you're not familiar with the scope of Arctic according to a synopsis. Again, I see real potential here from this picture. A man stranded in the Arctic after a plane crash must decide whether to remain in the relative safety of his makeshift camp or to embark on a deadly trek through the unknown. So it's a survivor story, and perhaps we've seen some of the constructions of that plot before in other film fare, or perhaps other entertainment endeavors, maybe in the TV landscape as well. I can certainly think of pictures that come to mind, maybe not by name, but I've read that type of message and theme before in different artistic publications. Still seems a bit like, to me, with Bleecker Street, it does seem that they have a more limited scope on their content. But that can be quite admirable, and I do like to look at smaller film fare all the time. That's why I've gravitated more. I tend to look at commercial fare as well, but I love spotlighting, perhaps, developing talent. And I'm not familiar with Joe Penna, at least from my understanding, in terms of either directing or writing background. I've always co-writing with, I missed the name, Ryan Morrison. Have I seen Joe Penna's work before? I don't know. Maybe his name rings a bell. Sometimes I come across names where I'm like, I know that name somewhere, and I can't attribute the project. Just on a general look, no, his pictures don't ring a bell personally. But again, I'm always game to check out new talent. And he's still working in terms of, again, this is coming off really late. So some of his more recent pictures as of years, he's served as a writer on, I guess, the Release television show. I haven't heard of that. And as a writer for Stowaway. And I think he's also a director there as well. So developing talent, but he's in the Bleecker Street atmosphere, and this project did get some recognition, so I'm sure this helped him in his career endeavors. And I'm interested to check it out just based on the Mads Mikkelsen attribution alone, but the scope of the story sounds pretty entertaining. If you're into survivor stories, and maybe themed around a bit more of an artistic nature presence, at least by the poster, that's what it boasts. It's a very captivating illustration, to be frank. Let's go ahead and take a look at Arctic. Maybe for some of you, you've looked at this long ago, and again, I know this video's aged quite a bit, but even if it's nearly 5 years later, I've wanted to be fair in terms of the older, and maybe it's part of the completionist side of me where I'm like, I did cover this a while ago, and there is some guilt as to why I can't have that original cut made public in terms of getting it fully edited, because this video, again, there's complications. I'll go into it one day, I'm sure, but I won't burden this video with it. But you're basically getting a fresh take from me, other than maybe, again, some of the attributions of what I've cited behind the movie's credits. Other than that, it's basically a first look-see. So I hope maybe for some of you who haven't seen a lot of Bleecker Street's offerings, you can enjoy this with me if you're into looking at smaller film fare. Perhaps don't mind that this film is aged a bit. Anyway, let's take a look at this.
I have to find help.
Good scope, good logo choice, by the way. I think the font style blends really well here. I know it's a simple comment, but it's just something I noticed. Beautiful presentation. I love wintertime imagery. It feels like a smaller picture, but again, a well-presented one.
Yeah. Can you squeeze? Like this. Squeeze. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And again, as I said, Mads Mikkelsen is a very competent actor.
It'll be here tomorrow. Or the day after tomorrow. Don't worry. She's running out of time. I have to find help.
It's a concise delivery, very well presented. It reminds me a lot of other nature-type fare, but with the added tension of it being more thriller-esque with the survivor layer. And the contained duration of time necessary to the picture's story. Yeah, beautifully shot.
It's okay.
Quite luminous thriller. At this point, probably available on DVD. They should specify that. Though again, I'm very late. I'm kidding. It's a beautiful picture. In looking at Joe Penna's filmography, he doesn't have that extensive of a library. And this was, I believe, picture number 8 that he worked on, at least that he was involved with. There's elements here that if you've watched Survivor Fare, especially with a more nature-skewed lens, it feels like there are familiar structures. I mean, even you can see that in the plot construction. But it's very well presented. A lot of static shots, not a lot of movement from the camera, especially when Mads Mikkelsen is in a more isolated position. Once another actor comes into the scene, and even when there's more going on, there's a little more tension in the presentation, more of a frenetic framing. it's still when it needs to be. I appreciate the moments of breath in the picture related to the feeling of... And again, this helps that it's a concise delivery because, again, it's only a 98-minute movie, so it is a little shorter than maybe ever Cinema Fare by comparison, but it definitely feels like a more limited window, but it doesn't feel like the film is unnecessarily reaching for different elements to substantiate the runtime. It feels fittingly contained and quite beautiful to watch. Exquisite in craft. Again, wintertime imagery always brings me in. It's always a pleasing aesthetic to me. It probably is my favorite season, to be honest with you. So a film like this appeals to me quite substantially on a visual level. I'm very impressed what I'm seeing here. And maybe part of the reason I've wanted to gauge older work as well, in particular, is, again, I want to be fair to other films that not only did I cover a while back, and I want to give a fair take to, even if perhaps it's under unusual circumstances, but... and also exploring other craft going forward. As I said, Joe Penna has done some other recent work. So looking at Arctic, and then maybe kind of some of his other pictures, if I have not been able to watch this movie in preparation of covering those whenever that happens to be, and I'll probably get to them eventually, I get a familiarity with the artist. And we'll get more of that in the next video. I have another one planned in regards to a connection to this with Arctic, but what I'm seeing here in terms of the main film... it's a very competent picture. Certainly, I would say deserves some of its awards regard. I don't remember if it won anything. I think it was just in the lineup for nominations. But it's a suited movie, a very well-suited movie, I would say, for a studio that has boasted artistic craft in what I have seen, and good, exemplary delivery from Bleecker Street. Again, their offerings as a studio have really impressed me, whether it be pictures I've seen or just witnessed in focus. But Arctic... looks like a great picture, and even the poster boasts some of its credits. What does it say in detail on the top quote? One of the best movies ever made about survival. Packed with excitement, claws ahead of the pack, and never looks back. I mean, that's a statement, and I believe of Mads Mikkelsen, it's a very competent performance to boot. But it's a beautifully presented picture. Again, by some merits, it does feel... and this makes sense for, like, developing talent, especially when you're... in the position of, again, being a developing filmmaker, you go with perhaps what is secure in efficacy of craft. And when I watch this, I do see familiar elements to other nature survival thriller fare. There's an aesthetic that is, it feels conventional and usual, but I don't say that in any way to be demeaning to the artist in terms of like, well, he didn't do anything fresh. I still think, again, it's quite competent, but I see the development of an effective vision based on consistent traits of what's pertinent to the genre and the film's focus. And I think of what is presented here, it's a beautiful picture that in some spirit mimics other iterations of this type of story, but is beautiful in its own presentation. And I would imagine, again, with Mads Mikkelsen, that adds a layer of competence as well to an overwhelming, pleasing movie. If you're into the survival fare thrillers, and even if somebody of a nature aesthetic, I'm sure this appeals to you. If you have gotten the chance to see it, I'm sure many of you at this point have. But then again, I don't know, because I look at Bleecker Street and I do consider that their films are slightly smaller, at least in audience engagement, at least from what I would garner. I mean, how many... well, I guess a lot of people saw this. The IMDb rating is sitting at 60 or 53,000 reviews at a 6.8 out of 10. So a lot of people have witnessed this. But at least the feeling of what I watched in comparison to maybe other studios' offerings, these films do appear a bit smaller. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down below. Again, I know an unusual circumstance and that I'm covering this so late, but better late than never. I do, again, want to approach film fare that I've had my eye on for a while and perhaps had covered previously, but for unusual circumstances, I had to go back to the drawing board, so to speak. Again, I'll articulate the circumstances a bit more in detail another day. I don't want to burden this video down too much. But I do want to be fair and cover, again, art that I've seriously thought about in a good limelight. I'd love to hear, though, what your thoughts are down below. If you're somebody who's watching this for the first time and looking at Arctic and perhaps considering, maybe you want to look at some film fare that's available. It's been available for a while, but you don't really know what to watch, right? Maybe perhaps this is a film that speaks to you, or perhaps you're somebody who's seen Arctic at this point. Maybe you're a Mads Mikkelsen fan and that's what launched you right in. If you feel so inclined to disclose your perception of this movie, I'd love to hear your opinion on it down below. I think, like I said, it's a very competent picture. It's smaller in scope, quite substantially, but accurately presented to best fit, again, the expectations of what a film like this would construe in forethought. And I do think Joe Penna, from what I've seen in terms of his director hand and from perhaps a writing standpoint, it looks like he's, again, developing into a space as a filmmaker in a very effective manner. And with Mads Mikkelsen in your movie, that certainly helps. And with the awards nominations and the regards, it certainly boasts your credits as a developing filmmaker. It looks good, and I'm sure this will be a never fever for Bleecker Street's cap as well, if it hasn't been already. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.